Straight to the point, first I want to look at the human eye tracking. I don't find human eye tracking to be as useful as animal eye tracking. And though we will see this lose focus a couple of times, make no mistake, this is at f1.2 with the Sony 50mm f1.2 GM, which is not a particularly close focusing lens, and it's doing a really good job right out to the edge, even with complete coverage. Excellent job, Sony. I say this is a great performance. Now let's get into something that I find much more useful, and that is animal eye tracking. It seems to be fairly sticky. Whenever there's no action, it's incredibly sticky. It goes off her body a little bit, it seems. It does a good job of reacquiring the eye, however. And it's nice whenever she turns away, it still kind of knows where her eye should be. Seems like it's doing a pretty good job with medium distances. And we can see that it will lose focus, but as soon as she turns her head, it's right back on the eye. So I would consider that a good performance. We're going to see the images in a little bit, but keep in mind, Lolly is a dark subject with dark eyes, and so the fact that it's finding it is nice, but whether they're sharp or not is a different story. Now we're going to switch into high frame rate and see if we can get some fast action shots. A point I want to make before I get into hit rates and we look at some of these, I want to mention, because I'm not making a separate video on the quality of this sensor in the A7RV, with this camera, you darn well better nail your exposure, because it's not a Sony thing. I think it's just a fact of the higher megapixels. Even at 400 ISO, see, I underexposed it like this. And just bringing it up like this, that noise is wild. It's a very fine grain, which is okay, but we can already see some bluing and some discoloration, right? So you darn well need to nail that exposure, okay? Just keep that in mind if you're considering picking up this camera. Now we can get into the hit rates. So I have already gone through all of these. It will seriously take me an hour to do all of them. I've found that the hit rate was about 60-40, okay? And that's 60 that are acceptably sharp and like dead on. I would say out of that 60%, probably, maybe 60% of the 60% were right on the eye. I have to say first that I still think that the Canon R5 has the closest to eye pupil tracking that I've seen between the Sony A7RV and the Nikon Z9. But it is an insanely good resolving sensor. I'm really starting to like 61 megapixels, just saying, just throwing that out there. If we give this a little bit of a play. Yeah, I do like it. It's a very detailed, stupidly detailed sensor. I love it. I really hope that Nikon's next camera is a 61 megapixel. So let's see if we can't get into some action shots and see how we did. Here she's running and it's kind of back here. And see, I only brought it up a little bit. Like if I pull this basically just +1 on the exposure, we do start to see some discoloring. And so it's got to just be because it's high megapixels and the noise, or the noise performance just isn't that good. I don't know. Discoloration is separate from just having noise. You usually don't see discoloration for a while. Or maybe it's just a reflection of the trampoline. We'll see as we proceed here. That one's not dead on. This is good because it's on her head, right? It can't really see her eyes, so it just reverts to her head. Sometimes it was reverting to the back, but you know. This is at f1.8. I guess I should have flagged which ones were on. That one's off. That one's off. That one's on. I mean, that one's on. Dead nuts. And then this one too. And this is actually, well, no, this one's not dead on. It's just a tiny bit off, but still, for being this close to the camera, running towards the camera, that's pretty good. I'll take that one. And this one being off to the side, it just started losing her, but it kept her all the way over here. So even though it's not on, it can still be considered a good performance. These are on at a further distance, that's okay. Noisy, but this one is on coming straight at the camera. Although I think it probably fell, yeah, see, it started to fall off. There is no camera on the planet that is good at tracking a subject that's moving fast directly at the camera. Okay, there is no camera that I'm aware of that is actually good at that. And again, keep in mind that Lolly is a dark subject with dark eyes, and so every camera on the planet is going to have a harder time tracking her eyes. But I'm going to get to a very important point here at the end, so just bear with me. That one's right on. It starts to fall off. Of course, she wasn't even in frame, so it had to try to reacquire. I don't think it did. This one here is my favorite, just because there's a bit of a subframe of her head, and it's almost dead on. It's very close. It's more like right here. It looks like it was moving down to her eye, but that's okay, because this is such a good picture that we're just gonna roll with it. And so since we have all these megapixels, we can crop in like this, no problem. And let's just give this a little play. Okay, so let me level with you. There are quite a few misses. I have to remind you, dark subject, dark eye. Okay, I'm not defending Sony. In fact, I'm gonna do the opposite. I think Sony users, and probably the industry as a whole, over-exaggerate the Sony eye tracking. Now, before you freak out and unsubscribe or do whatever, this is an excellent performance, okay? So I'm telling you that Lolly is a tough eye tracking subject, okay? No matter where she's at, she's always very, very high contrast, and it's just dark on dark, and it's trying to find an eye in the dark. The point I'm getting at is that Nikon does as good of a job, maybe actually a little bit better than the A7RV. This isn't the A1, this is the A7RV. The Canon R5 does as good, maybe a little bit better on the pupil than the Sony A7RV, okay? In my opinion. But the point is that this is a tough subject for every camera, and every camera is doing an exceptional job. Now that I have the experience with all of these cameras, it's apparent that there is some exaggeration in the industry. I don't want to offend anybody, but the point is, all of the cameras that are, you know, in this price range or higher are awesome, right? They all do a good job. Just about as good as each other, maybe a tiny bit better, maybe a tiny bit not as good. Who cares, okay? They're all excellent cameras. The one thing that Sony does have that Nikon doesn't have is this kind of performance in this price range. And so that is where I tip my hat to Sony, because with Nikon, to get this at all, even close to this, you have to have the Z9, okay? $6,000 USD after tax. You know, you have to pay that to get this performance. Sony has this performance in less expensive camera bodies. And so this is a compliment to Sony and just kind of a wake-up call to people that may already be in a system and they're thinking about switching. Maybe you don't need to, okay? Because they're all doing a good job. They all perform about the same on the hardest animal to eye track. And so that's the point that I have to make today. Other than that, I love the 61 megapixels off of this. Just again, be warned, get your exposure right, okay? Because this is a tough camera to recover even mild underexposures from. So if you keep that in mind, oh man, if you're interested in this camera, I think you'll like it. It did a really good job at the eye tracking. I'm Z-Wade, the Z-Wade, and Z-Wade Photo. We'll talk soon.